Zuri Adu was a powerhouse. As CEO of Adu Enterprises, she had transformed communities and built a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. But today, her focus wasn't on business. It was on her two young nieces, Emma and Lily. With their parents out of town, Zuri had promised them a day at the park, free of business calls and meetings. She had swapped her power suit for jeans and a blazer, blending into the casual weekend scene. 8-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Lily, with their bright blonde hair and freckled faces, raced ahead to the swings, giggling with excitement. Zuri followed, carrying their snacks and a favorite stuffed animal. But as they made their way across the playground, she began to notice the sidelong glances from other parents. The whispers followed quickly, with certain words ringing out. Suspicious. Doesn't belong. And can't be her family. Zuri tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the girl's happiness. But just as she reached the swings, a woman with impeccably styled hair and oversized sunglasses strode toward her, flanked by a small group of other parents. Her nose was scrunched in disdain as she looked Zuri up and down. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Can I ask what you're doing with those children?" Zuri looked at the woman with a calm but unyielding gaze. "They're my nieces. I'm here with them for the day." The woman's mouth tightened, her tone dripping with condescension. "Your nieces? Forgive me, but that's hard to believe. They don't exactly look like they belong to you." Zuri's jaw clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Believe it or not, I am their aunt, and we're here for a family outing." The woman crossed her arms, her lips curling in a sneer. "I think it's only fair we get some answers. People don't just walk around with children who look nothing like them. It doesn't look right." Another parent, a man standing nearby, nodded in agreement. "She's right," he said smugly. "You don't just show up with two white kids and expect people not to be suspicious. We don't know who you are." The third parent clutched her own child protectively, looking at Zuri like she was a criminal. "Maybe someone should call the police," she whispered, "just to be safe." Before Zuri could respond, the man was already dialing 911, glancing at Zuri with smug satisfaction as he reported her as a suspicious person with two white children. "This is harassment," Zuri said, her voice low but firm. "These are my nieces, and I have every right to be here with them." The man's smirk grew wider. "Then you've got nothing to worry about." Within minutes, police cruisers arrived, sirens blaring. Zuri's heart sank as she watched the officers step out, their expressions hard and serious. Emma and Lily, sensing the tension, moved closer to her, their little hands clutching her jacket. The sight of the flashing lights had clearly frightened them, but Zuri forced herself to stay calm. One of the officers, a tall man with a cold gaze, approached Zuri. "Ma'am, we received a call about a potential child abduction," he said flatly. "We're going to need to see your ID." "Abduction?" Zuri's voice was incredulous. "These are my nieces. We're here to enjoy a day at the park. This is a misunderstanding." The officer held out his hand, ignoring her explanation. "Identification, please." Zuri handed over her ID, watching as his eyes flickered with recognition. She could see the exact moment he realized her name, Zuri Adu, but instead of backing down, his gaze hardened, as if her status only fueled his resolve to assert control. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with authority, "you're going to need to come with us to the station to confirm everything." The officer's statement made Emma and Lily grip her arms tighter. Zuri knelt down to reassure them, but she felt a strong hand clamp around her wrist, pulling her to her feet. "I'm not done here," she said through clenched teeth, trying to stay calm for the girls. "Ma'am, resisting won't make this easier," the officer replied coldly. Emma's voice broke as she began to cry. "Auntie Zuri, don't go," she sobbed, clinging to Zuri. The lead officer's tone was dismissive. "It'll be fine, sweetheart," he said, but the words came out empty, almost mocking. Another officer took hold of Emma and Lily, pulling them away from Zuri despite their protests. Panic shot through Zuri as she tried to reach out for the girls, but the officers kept her restrained. "Don't you dare touch them," she demanded, her voice trembling with fear. "They're children, and they're terrified." The officer's response was icy. "You can sort that out at the station, ma'am." She was shoved toward the cruiser, her wrists roughly cuffed as if she were a criminal. The metal dug into her skin, a physical reminder of the unfairness of the situation. She was forced into the back seat of the cruiser, her heart pounding as she watched Emma and Lily cry out for her, their small faces pressed against the glass as they were led to a separate police car. As the doors closed, Zuri's panic turned to anger. She vowed that the officers, and the parents who had initiated this nightmare, would pay for every tear her nieces shed, every fearful moment she had to endure. At the station, they led her to a small, stark holding cell and locked the door behind her. Hours ticked by, and her mind kept replaying the moment the officers had taken the girls away. She wondered if Emma and Lily were being questioned, if they were safe, if they understood what was happening. Each thought sent a fresh wave of dread through her. Finally, they allowed her a phone call. She dialed her lawyer with trembling hands, explaining the situation in a voice that held both fury and urgency. "I want every officer involved held accountable," she told him. "They scared my nieces, humiliated me, and treated me like a criminal. Make them pay." The lawyer assured her that he'd handle it, and within an hour, he arrived with a city official who recognized the severity of the situation. The officers, now fully aware of the depth of Zuri's connections, began to look nervous, their bravado fading in the face of what they had done. By the time Zuri was released, the city was abuzz with news of the incident. Her lawyer had made sure that word spread quickly about the wrongful arrest, and the city officials were scrambling to control the fallout. The officers, who had once seemed so self-assured, were now visibly uncomfortable, squirming under the weight of her gaze. Zuri's voice was steady but deadly as she spoke to the police chief. "Your department's actions were not only unprofessional but blatantly racist. You treated me, a prominent citizen, as if I were a criminal, and worse, you terrified 2 innocent children." The police chief stammered. "Ms. Adu, I apologize on behalf of the department." "Apologies mean nothing without action," she interrupted, her voice cold. "Every officer involved will go through anti-bias training, and I expect a public apology to my nieces. The city depends on my investments, and I will not put another penny into a community that treats people like me as if we don't belong." Her demands were met, but Zuri wasn't finished. The following week, she addressed the city council and demanded sweeping changes to prevent incidents like this from happening again. "This isn't just about me," she said firmly. "It's about creating a city where no one has to live in fear of being judged or mistreated based on their skin color." Zuri launched a public awareness campaign covering the city with messages like "Families come in all colors" and "Prejudice has no place here." Schools introduced new programs on diversity, and the police department underwent rigorous anti-bias training, with the officers who had manhandled her leading the first sessions. They were forced to stand in front of the community and acknowledge their actions, delivering apologies not only to Zuri, but to her nieces, who had been deeply affected by the ordeal. The parents who had instigated the situation also felt the weight of her influence. At the next neighborhood association meeting, Zuri made it clear that she would only invest in communities that actively worked toward inclusivity. As a result, every association was required to amend its bylaws to include anti-discrimination clauses, knowing they had no choice but to comply. Months later, Zuri attended a grand gala hosted by the city in her honor, celebrating her contributions to inclusivity. The same parents who had humiliated her at the park were there, as were the officers from the incident, each looking uncomfortable and remorseful. The mayor took the stage, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thanks to Zuri Adu, our city is stronger, more inclusive, and more united than ever. Her vision and determination have transformed our community." As Zuri took the stage, her gaze swept across the room, landing on the parents and officers who had tried to tear her down. Her voice carried the weight of her conviction, but there was also a note of compassion. "I could have let you all suffer the full consequences of your actions," she began, her eyes unwavering. "You terrified 2 innocent children, humiliated me, and acted on nothing but prejudice. You deserve to lose everything." She paused, her gaze softening. "But I believe in change. I believe in turning mistakes into lessons. So instead of punishing you, I chose to teach. I chose to create a community where we challenge our assumptions, where we build a future free of fear and discrimination." The room was silent, the impact of her words sinking in. The parents and officers who had wronged her shifted uncomfortably, knowing she had every right to destroy them, but had chosen instead to transform their community. After the applause faded, one of the officers approached her, his face red with shame. "Ms. Adu, I'm so sorry. What we did was inexcusable." Zuri looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Remember this moment the next time you see someone who doesn't look like you. Make sure they never have to experience what you put me through." The officer nodded, his head hanging low. As Zuri left the event that night, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She hadn't just fought for herself, she had reshaped the city, leaving an impact far deeper than the buildings she developed. The people who had wronged her now understood the depth of her power, and they would carry the lessons she had imparted with them for life.